Good evening and welcome to the Eldritch Avenue podcast, documenting a lifetime of experiences with the ridiculous, the absurd, the unusual, the peculiar, and the sometimes unfathomable. I am your host, Joel Norman, sharing with you the many inexplicable happenings which have occurred to me over the course of my 57 years here on planet Earth. I will present my experiences of time spent on the Eldritch frontiers in 3 waves. The first wave stories will be the easiest for you to digest. These stories are non-threatening, easy to comprehend, and readily placed in reality. The second wave stories, though readily placed in reality, will be difficult to listen to, and only the empathetic mind will get through them. The third wave stories will look at these things all sane persons edit out of their conscious lives as they carefully curate the content of their reality. These are the things your mind will be desperate for you to avoid. These stories open wide that which is named the Eldritch, that being the otherworldly, that which is beyond. Thank you for returning to Eldritch Avenue podcast. In tonight's episode, I'm going to sort of wrap up the Eldritch Avenue podcast mini-series, which I have titled The Elvin Secret Stairs. And I've detailed most of the significant stories, the stories where, I was fully 100% awake. I mean, there was, of course, that most recent episode where, reality changed, and something shifted and I, in the middle of the day, reality changed for me and I didn't faint, I didn't pass out, I wasn't sick, but something switched me off in a hurry. And that's how I looked at it. I mean, I was in perfect health. I mean, I still am in really, really great health. That was something that recently I went and did, with my doctor and said, hey, how about we just run blood tests for everything? And she's like, that's a good idea, because you haven't done that in a while. And recently I had blood tests run on everything. They took so much blood. It was insane. I was like 4 vials, I think, plus. And everything came back, I was right in the middle. There's that range they always give you for everything. And I was always right in the middle on everything. So my doctor's like, you're fine. It's like, there's no indicators of, any ill health here whatsoever. She goes, if you want to, we can do an extra battery of tests next time if you want to, but, I feel like you're good to go. So that was a very recent, health check. So I'm, pretty happy there with that. But it's part of my practice of sort of keeping myself focused and keen in my perceptions and awareness, because over the years with everything that's gone on, culminating in the Eldritch Avenue podcast, it's been important for me to sort of correlate everything and document as much of it as I can. I've over the years kept many journals and diaries. I have a stack of lined paper, because I used to just buy the big thick things of lined paper for 3-ring binders, and I would just make notes. And I had a sleep journal, a dream journal, and really documented things really well. I didn't keep them all, the papers organized, that they're all there. And periodically, I go back over them and reread them and familiarize myself with that. And that's a practice, that a tradition I have with my mom too, of going back over when I go home to visit and go over photos and, keep the memories alive, and sort of keep this practice of, remembering things accurately. And it's always helpful to have another person to be able to do that with, because they'll keep your memories in check. And you do the same for them. They're like, well, it wasn't quite like that, or, oh yeah, I forgot about that, whatever. But going back over my notes and everything to prepare for the podcast, and now, of course, this little mini series within the podcast that I call the Elvin Secret Stairs. I feel like this podcast episode is going to sort of wrap up all of the significant details. There's a lot of fringy stuff that has happened over the years that I can't. There's no way to quantify it, or whatever, however you want to label that. I can't really validate it, and so that just has to stay in its own little fringy category. But it's very important to me that I know in my mind very clearly what did and did not happen, and anything that cannot be confirmed, like I was absolutely awake, it has to be that's fringe area. But over the years, there's been a lot of the middle of the night sleep disturbances, and I have gotten very practiced at checking myself when I would have these sleep disturbances, and it would be one of those things where you wake up and suddenly, for me, it was always like this panic. You just wake up in this panic that there's somebody in the house who's not supposed to be here. And that was just like the alarm in my head was like, there's somebody in the house who's not supposed to be here. There's somebody who should not be here. And I would jump up and run through the house, turning on lights and making sure the doors were locked and making sure there was no one there, and that went on for many, 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 many years. And I mean, I did research, about, sleep cycles and REM sleep and non-REM sleep. And of course, as you all know, REM sleep is rapid eye movement. And that's generally speaking when you're dreaming is when you're having rapid eye movement. And, if you do your research, you'll find out from, sources like the Sleep Foundation and WebMD and different places, the health clinics and health lines and stuff like that, in the National Institute of Health, you'll see they all agree on certain basic things about sleep, and that it's the first 90 minutes of sleep where you are in your deepest sleep. It's your deepest dreamless sleep is the first 90 minutes, and dreams, it's different for everybody. And those are only like, general guidelines, because really there's no rules. And some people go, dream right away when they go to sleep, and some people don't dream all night long or don't remember their dreams or whatever the case may be. But for me, back in the day when a lot of this stuff was happening, I was quite a night owl and would do most of my artistic work, painting and drawing and whatnot, late at night. Usually between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. is when I was really doing a lot of my creative work. And generally by 1:30 is when I would be winding down and ready to go to sleep. So I would go to bed by like 1:30 or so, and it would take me about anywhere from like half an hour to 45 minutes to fall asleep. And so then I would be in my deepest sleep by, 3:15, 3:30, which is when a lot of the shit would happen. I would, and I can't tell you how many times I woke up and looked at, and saw the clock, the red digital clock face saying 3:33 a.m. And I know that happens for a lot of people. I know a lot of people have, wake up at 2 to 3 in the morning. But that's people who go to bed at 10 o'clock at night too, and I was going to bed at 1:30. So by 2:15, I was in my deepest sleep, and that, lasts anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half, but I would wake up in a panic. Someone is here who shouldn't be here, and I would make this practice like, wake up. Is this real? Because when you first wake up, and I would be, am I still in the dream? And I'd be like, because there were a number of like fringy moments where I'm like, what's going on? And what am I seeing? Is it real? And I would make sure I would stand up and turn on a light and bring myself fully awake and then reassess the situation. And most of what I've reported in my podcast is stuff that happened when I was fully awake. But there was a lot of stuff that happened in the middle of the night that was fringy, and I'm kind of like, what's going on? But again, I'll just start out. This episode is going to be like sort of an eclectic blend of all of the last little bits and bobs that I felt that needed to be mentioned to sort of wrap up the Elvin Secret Stairs. It's something that periodically has an addition to it because it's ongoing. I suspect it will continue for the rest of my life. I don't know. But so going back to 3004 Ross Road in Ames, Iowa, where a lot of seriously crazy shit happened. I was gardening a great deal there, and I had gotten these. My landlord Francis, who was like 84 years old, was growing these plants. It's the Datura lily that a lot of people know them now because it's kind of become popular. But back in the day, that I'd never heard of them. And she called them moon lilies because they only bloomed at night, and they were very fragrant, and they were white, big trumpet lilies. They're really quite beautiful. And so I fell in love with them and gathered and planted the seeds and planted a bunch more. So there were just tons of moon lilies. And, one summer evening, there was just a lot of moon lilies blooming. And it was after midnight, of course, because I was college and I was always up in the middle of the night. Didn't go to bed till late. And I was picking moon lilies, and I had picked a huge armful of the moon lilies and was going to go back into the house and put them in water. And because I was going to go to the pub I worked at, which was Dugan's Deli. And I worked in the kitchen and the deli and sort of helped out bartending once in a while and would work the door when there would be, bands playing and stuff like that and whatnot. And so I was going to pick a bunch of moon lilies and take them in because I did that periodically, and they would, put them in glasses on the tables, and they loved that. And I loved working there. And so I was picking moon lilies, and it was pretty late, and I was going to do a late night run to Dugan's because back in the day, Dugan's Deli, bars in Iowa were open until 2 a.m. And so it was pretty late. I can't remember if it was not quite midnight. I don't remember exactly. But I was going to do it anyway because I was young and full of piss and vinegar, and I wanted to do it. So I went out and picked all these moon lilies and was coming back into the house, and it was a really happy memory. I was so happy. Everything was going so well, and I was so glad to be away from high school and just being out on my own finally. I was just so happy. It was so nice. And I came walking up the stairs, the limestone stairs, and was just so happy carrying all these moon lilies. And my flower gardens were right there at the top of the stairs as I would go into my walkout flat, the front door of my flat. And I, had the door propped open and was carrying these moon lilies. And I walked up and I was sort of looking at my flowers, but I was just deep in thought. And I, went through the front door and went in. As soon as I got into the house, I just stopped because I was sort of like, wait a minute. I just happened to notice that there was someone in the garden. And, I think my friend was Beth there. Beth or Sue was there, I think. I can't quite remember. Or Shelley. It was Shelley. And they were inside, and we were going to go to we were going to go to Dugan's Deli. And I came and walked in and set the flowers down, and I had noticed somebody in the garden, and I just thought it was Shelley who was helping pick flowers. But when I got into the house, there was Shelley, and there was Thomas there at that time? I can't remember. And, but I was like, oh, I thought you guys were out in the garden. They were like, no, we're in here. And I put all the lilies down in the sink, and I ran back out there, and I just suddenly like remembered I had this flash, this really clear image in my mind, of like this woman in white standing in the garden. And she was really slight, and she was really sort of frail. And she wasn't really tall, I don't think. But I remember she was really skinny and had long white hair. And the weird thing was why I didn't turn and fully look at her in the moment, because I was just sort of like, oh, moon lilies. And I'm sort of like, and it's subconscious. Your cone of focused vision, is quite small. But, at that time I was practicing, studying my peripheral vision because of all the stuff that was going on. So I was more adept at, actually seeing things more clearly in my peripheral vision. And has always been my practice, to do part of my meditation of studying my peripheral vision, and learning to focus a spot on the wall and then see what I can see beyond that without moving my eye, and literally using my subconscious, sort of, my peripheral vision. So I just remember that woman in white standing in the garden, and I don't know why I didn't stop immediately and turn and look at her. But when I ran back out the door, kind of like, who's that woman in the garden? And, like it's not Shelley, And I ran back out there, and there was nobody there. And like I said, I just had this vivid image in my mind of like, my mind played back to me like your peripheral vision was showing you this woman in white in the garden. And I was just like, huh. And that was a very distinct moment. I always thought that was kind of strange. And I thought, what was that? It sort of not rattled me, but it just really struck me very, very deeply. Because I'm like, that's something else. That's something else. And even though I never saw her directly, the memory of seeing her in my peripheral vision, because like I said, I was journaling, and anyway, I just remember that moment, and that was part of my experience there at 3004 Ross Road. And I always referred to her as the lady in white, and that was during a period in my life that was probably during the happiest period in my life, when I was truly happy and not carrying a lot of negativity around with me. But anyway, so that was, again, this brief moment at 3004 Ross Road, but I just always remembered that very clearly. So again, the list I'm doing tonight is sort of an eclectic blend that hops around through the timeline of my life, of things that were sort of like attached to or connected to the Elvin Secret Stairs, in my opinion. I did some research lately about the lady in white, and there's all kinds of legends, and that's the reason I call her the lady in white, is because my research, the descriptions of the lady in white and when she appears to people and stuff, was very similar to what my experience was. Everybody's experience with the lady in white was different according to different researchers and accounts of the lady in white, but mine did correlate with other people's. She represents gardening and people who care for the earth, kind of thing. So the next detail that I wanted to share, as far as things connected to the Elvin Secret Stairs, happened in the house I live in right now, and it was probably 2018, maybe 2017. I can't remember. I've been here for 15 plus years, I believe. But it was middle of the night. Well, not middle of the night. I hadn't gone to bed yet. So I was up, doing things, and I was working on a creative project. I was working on a costume, I believe. And I went back into the bedroom to collect a couple more costume items, because I was putting the whole costume together on dress form, and I needed like the foundation garments that I had already made. And I just was, doing the outer layers, and I went back into the bedroom to just get one little thing. I can't remember what it was. And I found it on top of, on my desk, and then was walking back out to go to my sewing machine in the living room. And I had a large armoire so that's set to the left of the bedroom door, between the closet door and the bedroom door. And there's just like this little space between the armoire and the door. And, it was just like this little tiny space. And I couldn't keep anything there because, there was really no, because the door would swing, open, and hit the wall there. And so I really couldn't put anything there so I could have, more room to walk through the doorway. So the door was always closed, or always open, and the door was always against the wall. And then there was a space between that door and my armoire. And I walked, back past the armoire and went through the doorway to go, into the hall that led to the kitchen, that led to the dining room, that led to the kitchen, or led to the living room where my sewing machine was at. And as I went past the armoire, I was, holding, this object for sewing this costume. And I got into the hallway, and I suddenly realized that there had been a figure standing next to the armoire, a little figure. And it happened very quickly, but I'm like, you're walking, and I pick up the object. I was looking at the object, and I was just turned back around and went for the bedroom door. And it's not a big bedroom, and it was only like, 3 or 4 steps to get from my desk to the bedroom door in the hallway. And I just turned around and walked back. And the moment I realized, as I got through the doorway, I realized there was this little gray standing next to my armoire. And I was just sort of like, oh my God. And I ran back in there. And of course it was gone. But I was very much alert and awake and not intoxicated and not, altered in any way chemically by alcohol or anything else. And it was just a very, 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 and I'm not going to say it was shocking, but it was, kind of like, bing! I was like, holy crap, because you walk through the door and you just, in that instant, that you notice that there's someone standing there, but I live alone and there was nobody there. It was an evening where I was home alone and I was working on costumes for my film. And again, it was a very happy moment. I was very much at peace. I was very happy. And all of a sudden, bang, there was a little gray standing in there. And I just ran back and looked and I was like, oh my God. Because, it was just, I don't know how to describe that. But it was, for some of these experiences, I immediately write them down or record a voice memo or whatever. And sometimes I'll actually go to my table and do a quick watercolor illustration to fix the moment. And so I do have a watercolor illustration for this one that I will be attaching to the Facebook page for Eldritch Avenue. So you can look up Eldritch Avenue, and I've updated the Eldritch Avenue Facebook page to include other visuals that I've created to help illustrate the stories. And you'll see some new ones that I did recently, like today. There's some new illustrations. I did another one for a past Eldritch Avenue episode with the one with my friend Tua. We're sitting on First Avenue. So I did a little Photoshop composite to just sort of illustrate part of that story. So if you have an interest, you can go and check the Eldritch Avenue Facebook page and see the additional illustrations. Now, this episode, there will actually be a little video of one of my evening's experiences where, I wake up in the middle of the night and I, check the timestamp on this video, and it's I got to quick check it again because I'm kind of like, wait a minute, what was the timestamp on that? Yeah, I have to just hang on a second. I have to quick check that because I had it here for a moment. Oh, there it is. All right, 3:16 a.m. It's on the timestamp from when it was recorded, and you can't alter that stuff because I took that on my iPhone. And so for that video, and it's the flickering lights at 3:16 a.m. And that's the timestamp. And I'm gonna post that video when I get this episode completed and posted on Facebook. So that'll hopefully be later on this evening. But again, I wake up in the middle of the night like something's going on. There's somebody in the house. Something's going on. Like there's alarm bells going off in my head. Get up, get up, get up. Seek out, seek out, seek out. Go, 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 go find. It was always just like this. And like, I was deeply asleep. And now I'm like, what the hell's going on? Something's going on. I'm like in a panic. There's like an alarm bell going off in my head. Like, get up. There's something going on. And I ran out into the kitchen. And the light, I have this sort of wall light above the kitchen sink. And it has 3 halogen lights on it. It's sort of this retro 30s kind of thing. But it's got 3 small halogen lights on it. And it was on. And I have to turn the lights off because I can't have the lights on in the kitchen because it'll shine into the bedroom and keep me awake. So I always turn the lights off in the kitchen because otherwise I can't sleep. And I go out there and the lights are like flickering, like ping, 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 ping. They're like flashing. Flash on, flash, flash, pulse, 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 pulse. And you'll see the video. It's kind of like, and I'm just standing there, and my phone just happened to be, I always put my phone on the counter in the kitchen so that I don't see it from the bedroom so that I won't be, I'll be bugged by that. So I always put the phone on the charger on the counter, and it was right there. So I pick it up and I start videoing, taping this light. I'm just like, what is going on? And it just kept going on. And it was like, it was this irregular sequence. And I, no clue what it was about. I don't know exactly, I finally stopped recording, I recorded it for like a minute. And it just didn't stop. And I was just sort of like, what's going on with this? So you'll see the video. And not that is anything significant, but it was strange. It was very strange. I wake up in a panic. What's wrong? And, go out and the lights are doing this weird thing in the kitchen. And like, there's no explanation for that. It just was very strange. But I associate it with this, middle of the night, 3:15 to 3:30 time zone thing when all this stuff would happen. So it's sort of interesting, and you can look at that, and it's not like that was a UFO or something, but it is what it is. But one other sort of actual UAP moment where I was with somebody, I was, let's see, this was in, I think the mid 90s, I would think. Was it the mid 90s? Yeah. And, or late 90s. Was it the late 90s? I think it might have been the late 90s. Whatever. And my friend Joe, who had moved to Cleveland to go to grad school, and then he eventually moved to Washington, D.C. And he came back for a visit, and he said, hey, I think we need to do a road trip and go to Des Moines and see your old haunts at the gay bars in Des Moines, and we'll go to the Brass Garden and stuff. And I'm like, okay, that sounds like fun. So we went down and stayed in this old deco hotel called the Kenwood, I think it was. And I think that's what it was called. It was a great old deco 1930s hotel. Really fabulous. Really fun, I should say. And we were driving back up Interstate 35W. And it was late afternoon, so the sun was just going down, so that would be to our left in the west, but the sun wasn't in our eyes. And I remember the first star came out, or what I thought was a star. And Joe was driving, so he's watching the road, and I'm just we're chatting and whatnot. And I just happened to notice this star. When, it started getting dark, because we left, late afternoon, early evening, whatever, but it was still summer. So it was, quite light out, and the sun was just going down. It was that sort of twilight period. And, the first brightest stars were just starting to peek out. And I just happened to be staring at this one star, and we're heading north, and just kept staring at it while we were talking. And I just didn't pay attention to the fact that I was staring at the star. But there's nothing to see on Highway 30 or on Interstate 35W between Des Moines and Minneapolis. I got to tell you, there's nothing there to look at. So I just spaced off staring at the star, and had been staring at it for an hour and a half. I bet at least an hour and a half. Quite some time. It wasn't just a few minutes. I'd been staring at it for a long time. And then all of a sudden, it just went screaming out of sight. I say screaming, but I mean it just took off and left a streak in the sky. A very vivid, but very momentary streak in the sky. And it wasn't a streak in my vision, after image streak. It was just a streak in the sky, and it just disappeared. And we were both staring, in that direction. I'm like, what the hell was that? And I leaned forward, and Joe was just sort of I didn't see anything. And I got the feeling that he did, but he just didn't. Joe was really super uptight. He's always been super fastidious about different things. And, though he was quirky, he was, very detail oriented. His second master's degree is in rhetoric, for crying out loud. So, he's one of those people who was climbing the ladder, and he's not gonna, mess with his reality in any strange way. And any time in the past I'd ever tried to talk to him about, UFOs and the paranormal, he would just shut me down. He's like, nope, not having it kind of attitude. And his responses were always that's nice, Joel. And he just made it very clear he didn't want to talk about it. So in that moment, I feel he was not by saying I didn't see anything, his tone and his sort of sudden rigidity said to me that, he's not going to remember this. And he's immediately going to start the process of sorting this out and making sure he never thinks about it again, and not talking. And that's how he does it, by not talking about it and just immediately saying didn't happen. But it was very significant to me. Another one of those times, from when I was at Francis's and outside staring at a star for hours, and suddenly it takes off. And that's, saw it. He was there. He saw it. He didn't say anything though. So I've reported in the past, some people will not acknowledge it. They curate their realities, and everybody sort of has, I'm not going to say it's superstition, but I feel it's one of those things that, everybody is aware of but doesn't talk about. It's just sort of no, we don't talk about certain things, and we don't think about certain things. And that's how we keep ourselves in our little happy pod zone. That's how it works. And that's been a difficult thing for me, but I've had to accept it and had to learn how to be isolated, even around people who supposedly, care for me, or my friends or family or whatever. But it was still a poignant experience, to stare at that star for an hour and a half and then suddenly have it go screaming out of sight. And again, tonight's episode is just a smattering of different things. There were, there's this one experience from when I lived in Garfield Avenue that I've always felt was sort of, fringy, but, I had gone to bed, and the bedroom door was always open, and it was one of those old Victorian houses, and this door was huge. So the bedroom doorway was quite large, and I could see, a good deal of the dining room beyond. And I had made this gigantic celosia wreath. And celosia is what, the common name is coxcomb. And My parents grew it, and I had purchased a bunch of celosia from them. It was called, I don't know what the variety was, Red Giant or something like that. Red Velvet, I think it was. And it was just really gorgeous. And it was like, this like bright candy apple fuchsia blended color in it. It was like cranberry. It was like a deep cranberry. That's a good way to describe it. And I had this huge cranberry colored celosia dried flower wreath on my wall, and it was like 4 feet in diameter. It was big, and I had used it for a client for the holidays. I used to decorate an Embassy Suites hotel out by the airport every year for the holidays, when I was freelancing as a floral designer and doing installations for holidays and stuff. And so I kept it at home and would, just take it back out and use it, at the hotel for the holidays, but it hung on my wall. And I had gone to bed, and it was, one of those nights where I toss and turn and toss and turn. And I just couldn't sleep because I was quite often an insomniac. And, I had, I think, gone to sleep for a little while, but, something woke me up, and I just was suddenly awake, and the room's dark, and there's a little bit of light coming in from the dining room, just ambient light, because, there's street lights that would, filter through the shears and stuff in the city, and there's always ambient light, especially at that apartment, because there was a security light there. And so I could see quite clearly in, the dining room, once my eyes adjusted. And it's like suddenly jolted awake, and I'm lying there, and I'm like, what's going on? And I see movement out of the corner of my eye, and I turn my eyes to look, and I felt confident I was awake, because if you're, sudden noise wakes you in the middle of the night, there's that fear thing that sort of grips you, which then that fear always comes with a dump of adrenaline. So you're just like instantly like, heart beating fast, and you're like, what's going on? I don't know if anyone here has ever been awoken in the middle of the night in fear, but if you have, you know what I'm talking about. And I just suddenly was jolted awake, and I see movement, and I turn and I look, and I see two little tiny people, and they were like maybe 3 foot tall. And I'm not going to say that they were the big-headed grays. They seemed different than that. So they were like little people, and I don't recall that they had great big heads. And they were crawling through the wreath, the hole in the middle of the wreath. Now remember, this is a 4 foot diameter wreath. And there was this little ladder that went up into the center of the wreath, and they crawled up the ladder and into the hole of the wreath, like it was a window or something. And then they pulled the ladder through after them. And I was just sort of like, what the fuck? And I just sort of like, at that point in time, my heart's pounding, and I'm just kind of like, what the hell's happening? And there's always a strange light, like a light without a light source. And that's why it's strange. And I don't know how to describe this to anybody. I don't know how to describe light without a light source. Because there's always, whenever you have light, there's a light source. Whether it's the sun, whether it's the moon, whether it's a lamp on your desk or a light on the ceiling, a lamp or chandelier on the ceiling, there's always a light source. But then with these experiences, the light is just like there. It's like this weird ambient light, as if it's like, when the sun first starts to come around, and before you see it on the horizon, there's that dim light in the early morning, and this was, I don't even know what time this was, middle of the night. This was not the sun coming up kind of moment, and I was just sort of like, it was the middle of the goddamn night. and they crawled back up their ladder and dove through the hole and pulled the ladder back through, and then the light went out, and things were really dark. And I'm like, okay, I have to get up. Because I was torn between, like, I'm kind of scared now. I'm kind of scared. And what do I do? And it's like, I couldn't, this wasn't like, you're when you're a kid, you're like, just pull the covers over your head and it'll be okay. I can't do that. That doesn't work for me. But as an adult, obviously it doesn't work. But, so I just got up and ran out there, and that's sort of like always been my instinct, is to like run into the fray or go to the scene, make sure it's real. And they dive back through the hole, pull the ladder, and then that weird ambient light is gone. Everything's dark, and I'm like, what the hell? And I jump up and run out to the dining room. And there was a little bit of ambient light coming in through the dining room windows, and I just had shears, and the street light from the alley at the corner of the house, was illuminating the space between the buildings, but it was far enough away that the light was still kind of dim, so the room was like now darker than it had been a moment ago. And I was like, what the hell? And I'm looking around, moving my eyes and looking, and there's nothing there. There's nothing going on. And I turn on the light in the dining room, and I do my usual routine of turning all the lights on in the house and walking around and looking behind doors and looking in closets and looking out the windows, and there was nothing there. But, it is what it is, and that's what happened. And, I have to like sort of just chalk it up. So of course, now I'm wide awake. So I just start writing it down, start journaling it in one of my diaries. So, but still, that one was really weird, and it wasn't the Greys. It was something else. I don't know what that was. And to myself in that moment, I'm like, okay, I was asleep. I'm just going to say I was asleep, and I woke up and I was sleepwalking, and that's all there is to it. But it sure didn't seem like it. We all tell ourselves stories to deal with stuff and to get through things. And sometimes I'm like, I don't want to deal with this shit anymore. I don't want to deal with this. I was, after many years of this stuff, I really got to a point where I'm like, I'm so tired of this shit. I'm so tired of sleep disturbances. I'm so tired of being tired from sleep deprivation and sleep disturbances and nightly bullshit, that I just was like, because I even talked to my doctor about why do I wake up? Why am I kids are, they couldn't figure anything out, but so whatever. Don't know about that one. That was kind of fringy, but it kind of wasn't, it kind of wasn't. So there was one other story that is, again, sort of in this category where I'm asleep, but suddenly I'm way awake because there's this thing that they do, and you can check this with other sources. Whitley Strieber's books record this, and other people who have had experiences with, as he calls them, the visitors. It's what he calls them. He was just sort of like, are they evil? Are they good? Are they evil? Are they good? And in the end, he chose to believe they were good. I personally, and this is going to sound just complete, like just sheer lunacy. And there are times when I'm like, I really wish it was mental illness, if only. And I think I've said that before in a previous episode. Sometimes I just wish it were mental illness, but I've done the thing where I go to the doctor, do all the blood tests, have a therapist, have had therapists, and sorry, they're like, you're not mentally ill. I'm just kind of like, darn. But, so there was one other story that was kind of in this category. And, it's that whole sleepwalking thing is weird. And because you wake up while you're sleepwalking. And so I can't really, this is sort of one of those things. But again, it's just so vivid And I know this, maybe, there's some hidden issue with my body or my mind, and it's caused some of these fringy stories. Because there's plenty of I don't mean stories, I mean experiences. I will sometimes say story, but I mean experiences. If something's not an actual experience, then, I will say, this is fringy. This could be me still asleep, or I'm sleepwalking. So it's kind of fringy, but it happened frequently enough that I, am like, was it there? I don't know. Was it there? Because I saw it, and now I turn around and it's not there. So what are you going to do? You see it one moment, and you go to turn on a light. When you look back, it's gone. It's like, that's the human mind, right? So this last episode about the Elvin Secret Stairs is got a few more fringy elements to it. Mind you, there's an insane amount of stories of sleepwalking and getting outside and with the little people. And it's like, okay, I don't know. There's like lots and lots of people like to say, oh, that's just myths. That's just stories people told to entertain around the fire. Okay, but there's enough records out there, people saying it's more. It's not just campfire stories influencing the waking mind, and I definitely agree. There's more to it, but if you choose to just not believe it or ridicule, then that's your choice, and I don't really care, because again, I'm not doing this because I need to feel validated by other people. I'm doing this for my own personal mental health, just getting it out of my system, telling my story, making a record, uploading it to iTunes so that it's a secure record. People can say what they want, and they can not hire me for future jobs because of it. I don't really care, because I got to get it out of my system, because it's a good thing. And therapists I've talked to have said, yep, do it, make your move, do it, absolutely. So that's mostly the collection of stories for this episode. There was, like I said, this last little story of another sleep disturbance experience in the middle of the night after 2 a.m. And I am jolted awake by someone tapping on the window. And I just wake up, and I immediately I prop myself up on my elbow and put my hand on my desk, because I have a desk right next to my bed. And there's a street light out, I can see the parking lot behind my building, and there's a street light there. And there were these it's always two little guys, two little people in silver suits. And they were like, not that mylar, but it was like there's a subtle texture to the silver. And they have hoods. The hoods come up and over their heads, and the hoods almost have like a point in back. And they're at the window, and they're like, come out and play. Why don't you come out and play? And I remember, like, in my mind, I thought that they were children. And I'm like, and I'm like, I'm talking to them. Okay. I'm not like fully like with it, obviously. But someone knocks on the window, wakes me up, and I look, and there's these little kids standing outside my window. Now, the window itself, like the sill of the window, is like 7 feet off. Well, is it 6? It's probably like 6 feet off the ground. Okay, so if there were kids there, they would have to be levitating. Because otherwise, because they were only like barely 3 feet tall. These little people, little figures, and they had these silver suits on. They're like a silver jumpsuit with a hood, and the hood was cinched up or under their chin, And I don't remember their faces at all. I just, like, it was a person in my mind, and in the moment, I was just sort of like, I literally said, where are your parents? Why are you out by yourselves in alone? And I started looking around too just a little bit like, why are there just two kids out in the alley at 3 a.m. by themselves? I'm like, that's not okay. That's not cool. I'm like, where are your parents? And I'm like telling these kids, where are your parents? And they said, come out and play, come out and play. And I'm just kind of like, what? And I'm like, and the thing was, I didn't know any kids really. And at that time, none of my friends had kids. And I was just sort of like, where are your parents? And I kept saying, where are your parents? And I thought, I have to do something here. This can't, I have to. So I'm like, I need to get dressed and call one of my neighbors and say, like, there's kids out and there's little tiny kids in the alley. Whose kids? Someone needs to take these kids to the police or something like that. And, I go to turn on the light and they move away from the window, and I fumble with the switch on the light because it's like down on a cord alongside the bed. And I finally find the switch and turn it on, and I look back and they're gone. And I was sort of like, so then I literally did get dressed and I went outside. I opened the door and there's nobody there. There's nobody in the alley. And I went and walked and stood in the alley because I'm like, I was out there pretty quickly too, because I just threw on my robe. That's what it was. I just threw on my robe and my slippers. And I just ran because the robe is on a hook right by the bedroom door as I go past the bedroom door. The bathroom door is next to the bedroom door. I just grabbed my robe and my slippers are right there. And I slid into my slippers and pulled on my robe and I went out the back door, and it's a short walk to get outside from my bedroom. And I went and I walked out into the alley. There was nobody there. I'm standing under that street light and there's nobody there. And you can see all the way down the alley in both directions. There was nobody in the alley. I was just like, okay, I don't know. I don't know. So I just went back in. I'm like, I'm just going to chalk this up as another one of those stupid damn, am I sleepwalking? I don't know. It was weird. But again, little people, and I remember those silver suits, and the silver suits are things other people who have experiences in the middle of the night with UAPs report. Little tiny people in silver suits. Anyway, it is what it is. Was it a dream? I don't know. It's kind of fringy, but it didn't feel like a dream. It felt like I was awake. I don't know. That's the thing. So anyway, that's sort of the collection of stories for this last Eldritch, or the last Elvin staircase. There may be other additions to the Elvin staircase, but that's pretty much all the stories I wanted to report. Some of this week's episode, I was sort of like, I don't know, some of these are kind of fringy, and I just didn't want to do that because I wanted to keep it, to stories that were, but life isn't like that, and the outer world and the other worlds, and anybody who's had weird experiences knows, there are no rules, and reality is what it is. So, in my research dealing with all of this stuff, because I've actually been, I study the data about quantum mechanics. That's one of my hobbies, is studying quantum mechanics. And I keep pace with, when they first started talking about string theory, and then that went to M theory, and then the theory of everything, and it's evolving. The understanding of quantum mechanics is evolving. And I'm like, I need to understand more fully the universe and the fabric of reality itself, and it really is where everybody's study should begin. Relativity is not the end all be all of quantum mechanics, and the theory itself has issues, but moreover, quantum mechanics is just one perspective to view what, people refer to as a holographic universe, because it really is just a hologram. It's just electrons and photons, and though photons don't really have mass. I mean, recently there's some interesting studies into reality itself, and there's electrons and there's lots of particles, and you can look this up online. You can definitely find this research very easily from reputable sources, so don't take my word for it. But in my opinion, it all comes down to the Higgs field, and it's the Higgs field that imbues particles with mass, and creates the ability for all particles to slow down and have mass. So the Higgs field is this sort of big mystery in the universe, and they know it exists, and they know that it's the Higgs field that gives all particles mass. And that, in my opinion, is how the UAPs sort of travel. Is they have, the ability to apply and like a rheostat to the use of the Higgs field. And that was another thing that came into my mind as trying to understand when I would wake up in the middle of the night after a sleep disturbance and feel compelled to draw pictures of these things and then descriptions of what they are and what it means. And some of them were like technology. I remember the one drawing is like, I remember I labeled it something like the warp core chamber of a UFO. It was something like, this is the motor. And it was this chamber with all these, things that emitted this gas, and they ran the high density electrical plasma fields through it, and that was how and it had a rheostat on it. And that's how they would apply the Higgs field to the electrons in their vehicle. And they could then, dial down the Higgs field and then zip away super fast. And that's how they're able to travel so quickly, according to this, my sort of journal, the ideas that I've had in the middle of the night after these experiences, kind of like, okay, I have a weird experience, and then there's like, oh, now it's time for science class. And I'm like, well, you mean pseudoscience? Or, I never took it too seriously, but I would still write it down because I felt compelled to. It's like, I have to write this down or I'm not going to be able to get back to sleep. And that's sort of like how it works. Either I do it or I am going to be unhappy by not doing it. But that'll be some more details when I, will add those drawings to, the Eldritch Avenue Facebook page. But I just feel it's important for people to sort of consider the science of things too. Because if you're not thinking about the science and you're not studying the quantum mechanics, you can't really fix it in your mind in a serious way. And I've been through enough of this shit that I have to do these extra things to give myself peace of mind. And it's not about being happy. It's about finding peace, and I would like to experience more peace in my life. That's for sure. But anyway, I'm going to wrap it up for tonight because this is going to be kind of a longer episode. There will be, I'll probably come back to the Elvin Secret Stairs, as, I get more notes and things together and, cause I want to do like some additional episodes where I'm just talking about my personal theories and sort of delve into my journals and notes that I've kept over the years. And we'll be adding a lot of those drawings to the Facebook page. Not that it's really important, but again, it's part of my mental health program. And I hope that someday this is going to reach people who really need to hear it, who need to, know that there's someone who's not a lunatic and who's having these experiences and able to deal with them in a way that's logical and pragmatic. Because you see all those people on TV, and even with the recent Senate hearings and those people who were carefully staged for the cameras, and those people who have all their blogs and their well-known vlog people, whatever, but they've not actually had these intense experiences, and I've researched it. So, but anyway, that's sort of the last sort of big bag of Elvin Secret Stairs experiences. So for those who have listened, thank you, and I hope that you enjoyed this. Again, it's for my own mental health, so that's all that matters. So take care, be safe, and thanks for listening.